Welcome to the very first lesson of the Cavalry Maintenance Coordinating Bootcamp. And not to start off on a negative note, but before we can talk about the solution, we need to address the number one issue or the number one problem that our industry is facing, which is, of course, according to our biased self, which is maintenance. And more specifically, it's more about the complexity and all of the work that goes into coordinating maintenance at scale. Completing work orders, that's one thing, but doing it with the same level of service on a consistent basis at scale is difficult, and it requires you to follow a certain system so that everybody involved follows the same rules to achieve that same level of service. So many property management companies, especially when they're just starting out, they are overwhelmed with the number of work orders that one company sees. So what we're seeing across the board, across the nation, is that for every 100 units that a property management company manages, they're seeing about 40 to 60 monthly work orders. So meaning 40 to 60% of the units managed, you see monthly work orders. That may be a little bit lower for you, but there are several reasons for that, which will be addressed in a later video. Now, to briefly touch on that, the reason for that could be that the tenant's trust is lost. So let's say, for example, your tenants have had bad experiences or bad communication or whatever it may be, then the tenant will be less inclined to then submit a work order. So therefore, what we're seeing is with companies that have a low number of work orders compared to the units managed, we're seeing that whenever we take over, that number of work orders increases. And then, of course, if you're a property management company that is making money on maintenance through markup or whatever it may be, then you will also increase your revenue, by doing this right. Now, what we're seeing is that property managers, especially when they're coordinating maintenance themselves, it can go as high as 80% of their time that's being spent on coordinating maintenance. That is a problem because property managers are also responsible for acquiring new doors, new business for the property management company. Next, the problem is that to effectively coordinate maintenance, you need a system and you need a team. That team needs to be in line with the system. So you build out your system, which exists of processes and SOPs, and then you need a team to execute that if you want to do it right. If not, you're just going to run an inefficient company where the property manager is responsible for doing everything, and they are just not the right people to do that. There's other people to do that for, and that is for example, a coordinator, maintenance coordinator or maintenance manager. Another problem is that when maintenance is not done correctly, usually it results in bad tenant reviews and bad owner reviews, which then further damage your newly incoming customers who check out your reviews, of course. And then finally, it's also the number one reason for tenant and owner churn. So let's say a tenant is not satisfied, the owner will find out, the owner then starts to question like, hey, is this the right company for me? And that's how you lose an owner. All right, then next up, the hiring dilemma. This is another problem in the industry. So usually what happens is a property management company, you start off, you get some doors and you start becoming more profitable. Maintenance is starting to become an issue because it is stacking up, it is a lot, and it just grows exponentially. And the problem then is that most property managers or property management companies are like, okay, now it's time to hire a maintenance coordinator and it's going to solve all of my problems. That is unfortunately not the case. The reason for that is because most maintenance coordinators are very poorly trained. So I'm sure that when you interview people, you're asking them, you're looking at their resume, you're asking them about their experience and so on. But unfortunately, the vast majority of property management companies do not have training. They do not have real systems in place. So even though that maintenance coordinator has experience, they don't necessarily have experience in managing it the proper way. And then next up, low industry standards. What do I mean by that? Well, most property management companies that we speak to, whoever start working with us, they often think that their maintenance KPIs are good, and then we have to tell them that they're not. And that causes most people to think that they're running a good maintenance department, whereas they don't really understand what is possible. So in general, what we're seeing is that the standards are too low. What does that result in? Usually when there's a maintenance coordinator in place, it means that that maintenance coordinator, let's say they get overwhelmed, right? Because there's too many work orders, or so you think that there are too many work orders, we'll just add another maintenance coordinator while it's not necessary. So that means that most property management companies, they have low standards on KPIs, then resulting in inefficient companies where you're basically overstaffing your company. It's not necessary. And then finally, when you hire, what we're seeing often is the property management companies hire a first maintenance coordinator, it doesn't work out, and then they rehire, they have a lot of hope again, and then it's just a cycle. Now, lacking on your maintenance systems does not only affect your tenants and your owners or internally your team, it also affects your relationships with your vendors. Because if you do not have systems in place, what happens often is that you also don't have a system in place for example, owner contributions, which is a very big one. And let's say, for example, there's an HVAC system that needs to be replaced, and you do not collect an owner contribution or verify that the owner has funds beforehand, and you approve the job. Well, now what's going to happen is the vendor, if the owner doesn't have the funds, the vendor is going to have to wait for the funds to come in from the owner. And what we've seen in many cases is that the owner then just says, hey, my rent is $2,000, you can take from the next incoming months. That is very bad for the vendors, and it's very bad for the relationship with the vendors that you're building. Also, poor communication. So when a maintenance coordinator does not have the right processes, so now they're overwhelmed, and now they don't have time to address all of the work orders. So meaning that not all work orders are touched, meaning that there's poor communication and it takes a long time for a vendor to get answers. That also damages the relationship with the vendors. Not only does it damage the relationship with you, with one single property management company, it damages the whole industry, because what we're seeing, we speak to a lot of vendors, and unfortunately the property management industry is not well seen in the vendor community, just mostly because of bad communication and late payments. So I'm very curious to see, is this something that resonates with you? Is this something, do you feel like I'm right on these issues? Do you feel like it is the number one issue in the PM industry or not? Let us know, please comment and let us know on that. Thank you.